The stars looked calm that day, but behind that calm, the galaxy's strongest power, the Vraxian Empire, was already making its move. For thousands of years, their fleets had conquered world after world, building a dominion that stretched farther than anyone could count. They saw themselves as the masters of civilization, the peak of logic and evolution. When their exploration probes detected human signals from a distant part of space, they didn't see a threat. They saw a primitive world still learning to walk among the stars. The first report about Earth reached the Vraxian High Council with laughter. Humans had only a few colonies, a handful of ships and weapons that looked ancient by galactic standards. They still used ground troops and artillery, concepts the Empire had abandoned thousands of years ago. To the Vraxians, it was almost funny. They believed true wars were fought from orbit, with precision beams and unmanned fleets. A species still relying on soldiers and metal cannons seemed hopelessly outdated. The council chamber filled with amused voices as they reviewed human military data. The footage showed tanks, artillery trucks, and soldiers in helmets, each one looking small against the vast technology of the Empire. One commander chuckled and said, "Do they really think war is still fought from the ground?" Another added, "Maybe they haven't learned what real power looks like." But somewhere far from their laughter, on a quiet blue planet, humanity was preparing. Earth Command didn't laugh. They had seen the Vraxians' fleets, their cities floating in orbit, their armies made of machines and bio-engineered warriors. Humanity knew it couldn't match their numbers or their technology. Yet they also knew something the rest of the galaxy didn't understand. Humans had never needed to be the biggest or the fastest to win. They just had to be determined enough. Every human leader, every commander, and every engineer on Earth worked around the clock. They studied the Empire's movements, analyzed their tactics, and quietly built something different. While the Vraxians were polishing their orbital weapons and refining plasma cannons, humans were reinforcing old things: tanks, railguns, field artillery. They didn't try to copy alien technology. They improved what they already knew. The preparation spread from one colony to another. The workers on Mars tightened the bolts of massive rail cannons. On Luna Base, engineers tested high-velocity projectiles that could fire without energy-based signatures. And on Earth, hidden beneath deserts and oceans, production lines built endless rows of old-fashioned-looking machines that held something new inside: precision, coordination, and the power of unity. To outsiders, it looked like a desperate effort. To humanity, it was survival. When the first human ambassador tried to negotiate with the Vraxians, the response was cold and dismissive. The aliens didn't even hide their arrogance. They told humans that Earth would soon join the Empire, whether they wanted to or not. The ambassador's message was broadcast across Earth before the signal went dark. People watched as the alien representative smiled and said, "Your planet will not resist us long. Your armies walk while we fly." That message changed everything. Factories stopped sleeping. Engineers volunteered for longer shifts. Pilots and gunners trained under harsh, sleepless skies. Across every continent, a silent promise was made that no matter what came, Earth would not bow down easily. The Vraxian invasion began quietly, almost casually. Their ships arrived without warning, shimmering like silver blades against the darkness. They didn't even send their full fleet, just a demonstration force, a small group of ships to make humanity surrender faster. The target was a small colony world called Vesta Prime. It was a new settlement, barely developed, home to farmers, miners, and a small defense base. The Empire thought it would fall in hours. From orbit, the Vraxians sent out a warning: "Evacuate or be conquered." The human base commander looked up at the message on the holo screen. He didn't respond. Instead, he walked out to the open field where soldiers stood near their equipment. The machines around them looked heavy and old. Massive cannons anchored into the ground, missile trucks hidden under camouflage, drones hovering low, waiting for orders. To the untrained eye, it looked like a museum of outdated warfare. But each piece of equipment had been modified with human creativity. Manual targeting mixed with AI guidance, kinetic shells with micro-drives, artillery systems able to shoot through planetary storms. The Vraxians didn't even bother scanning the surface deeply. Their computers detected no advanced shield systems, no energy grids, no anti-orbital defenses. To them, it looked like a soft, easy target. One of the alien officers even joked, "This battle will be over before our evening meal." Human radar systems detected the landing ships long before they appeared. Every soldier on Vesta Prime watched as streaks of light crossed the sky, the Empire's first wave descending. The ground rumbled. The alien ships opened, releasing troops and machines that glowed with energy shields. They were elegant, efficient, and terrifyingly fast. The humans didn't panic. They didn't move. The Empire expected to see chaos. Instead, they saw calm. Soldiers crouched in trenches, their helmets reflecting the red dawn. Commanders gave orders in steady voices. The artillery teams made last-minute adjustments to coordinates. Somewhere in the control bunker, a human voice whispered through the radio, "Wait for my mark." The Vraxian ground forces began their advance, scanning for energy readings. They found none. The alien officers laughed again. They didn't realize that the human weapons didn't rely on energy. They relied on motion, on mass, on raw power that couldn't be tracked or jammed. The commander of the alien force reported back to orbit saying, "No threat detected. We'll secure the colony shortly." But in that same second, far away, Human Command watched the feed from orbit and saw the perfect opportunity forming. A simple order echoed across the communication lines. 3 words spoken softly. "Artillery, prepare fire." The alien soldiers moved forward, stepping closer to the hills and ridges around the colony. Birds took flight. The wind grew still. Somewhere behind those hills, a human gunner adjusted a lever and locked in the final angle. The old machines hummed, their massive barrels turning toward the sky. Every soldier felt the tension like the air was waiting to explode. Then, just as the Empire's commander ordered his troops to advance, someone whispered the final word. "Fire." The silence shattered. The sound that followed was not just noise, it was a storm of metal and thunder. Even from orbit, sensors trembled. The ground shook as hundreds of shells streaked through the air. The alien army looked up in disbelief as trails of fire crossed the sky, each one faster than their eyes could track. It was the first time in centuries the Vraxian Empire had heard the sound of old-world artillery. The Empire's officers on orbit watched in confusion. Their scanners showed nothing logical. Their ships had detected no energy weapons, no beams, just sudden bursts of destruction tearing through their forces. They couldn't understand what was happening. To them, it was impossible. Their shields had always worked before. Their formations had always held. But against the sheer force of physics, the kind humans had mastered long ago, those shields meant nothing. And down on the surface, through the smoke and dust, the human soldiers didn't cheer. They just reloaded. Their faces were calm, their focus sharp. They knew this was only the beginning. In the Vraxian capital, news of the unexpected resistance reached the council. The laughter that once filled the chamber disappeared. One of the high commanders stared at the battle footage, silent for a long time. Finally, he said quietly, "They're using kinetic projectiles. On this scale? That's impossible." But it wasn't impossible. It was human. Across Earth and its colonies, people watched the first transmissions of the battle on their screens. They saw flashes of light, the shape of artillery fire cutting through the clouds. For the first time in generations, humanity wasn't afraid of a stronger power. They were inspired. The soldiers on Vesta Prime became symbols of something greater. The Vraxians had believed humans were weak because they didn't follow galactic norms. They measured strength in technology alone. What they didn't understand was that humanity's true strength didn't come from machines. It came from their will to survive, to adapt and to keep fighting even when logic said they shouldn't. That night, while the smoke still rose above Vesta Prime, the human commander looked at the stars and whispered, "They laughed at our ground forces. Let's see if they still laugh tomorrow." The first shot had been fired, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. The first attack on Vesta Prime changed everything. What began as a routine occupation for the Vraxian Empire quickly turned into something they had never experienced before. The moment the human artillery opened fire, the calm rhythm of their invasion broke apart. Their sensors went blind, their formation scattered, and confusion rippled through every unit that had touched the planet's surface. When the smoke began to settle, the aliens expected to see wreckage, human wreckage. But instead, the ground was filled with the quiet hum of human engines, their guns still aimed, their soldiers still watching. The humans didn't cheer or shout. They only reloaded, adjusted, and waited. From orbit, the Vraxian commanders stared at the strange readings on their control panels. The battlefield made no sense to them. They couldn't track the source of human fire. Their targeting systems depended on energy signals and heat patterns, but humans used something different, machines that didn't emit the usual signs of advanced weapons. It was like fighting an invisible enemy with tools from another age. The Empire's commander-in-chief aboard the flagship sent a message to the surface forces. Advance. Eliminate resistance. They still didn't take it seriously. To them, humans were stubborn animals clinging to old tactics. They believed once the ground troops closed in, the human defense would crumble. But the humans were not waiting to crumble. Inside the dugouts and bunkers scattered around the colony, the soldiers stayed low and steady. Dust filled the air as distant impacts shook the ground. The colony's sky was red now, painted by fire and smoke. One of the soldiers spoke softly through the radio, asking if they should fall back. The answer came firm and calm. Hold position. Wait for the next mark. The alien walkers, their armored machines, moved through the valley, their steps shaking the soil. They were beautiful to look at, sleek and covered in glowing plates of energy armor. The Vraxians had spent centuries perfecting their war machines. They believed no primitive weapon could touch them. But the humans weren't trying to destroy them with energy. They were using momentum, angles, and timing. Behind the ridges, teams of artillery crews turned the old barrels toward the moving columns. Computers were offline to avoid detection, so everything was done manually. They measured distances by sight, adjusted angles by instinct. Many of them had trained for this moment for years. They didn't need fancy scanners. They had learned to trust their hands, their eyes, and each other. Then from the trenches, a voice whispered through every earpiece. Fire. The sky lit up again. The first shells screamed overhead, their trails carving through the smoke. The explosions didn't sound mechanical. They sounded alive, like thunder breaking the planet apart. The alien machines staggered, their shields flaring and collapsing one by one. From orbit, the Vraxian officers leaned closer to their monitors. The humans had destroyed half of the landing force in less than 3 minutes. That was impossible by their calculations. Their empire's pride was being shaken by something they didn't understand. Discipline and precision, not raw power. The aliens responded quickly, sending in air support. Their small, sleek ships dived through the clouds, releasing bursts of plasma that scorched the surface. The human lines broke formation, but not in fear. Every movement was planned. They disappeared under camouflaged nets and hardened shelters, letting the enemy fire burn the empty ground. When the alien airship circled back for a second strike, human missile teams activated their hidden launchers. From deep tunnels, steel containers rose slowly to the surface. The moment the alien fighters turned, a rain of guided rockets shot up into the sky. The first alien pilot saw the flashes too late. The missiles didn't track with heat. They used magnetic locks and radar reflections that the Empire had long forgotten how to defend against. Within seconds, the airships fell in bright streaks across the horizon. The Vraxian fleet watched in disbelief, their screens filled with static. None of their predictions had prepared them for this. Down below, the battlefield turned silent for a moment. The smoke cleared enough for the humans to see what they had done. Dozens of enemy machines burned in the distance. The colony still stood. For the first time in the Empire's history, one of their invasion fleets had been forced to stop advancing, but the humans didn't celebrate. They knew this was far from over. Above the clouds, the full Vraxian command fleet had already begun adjusting its orbit. If the ground forces couldn't handle the fight, the Empire would simply vaporize everything from above. That was how they had crushed other species before. Human intelligence officers expected that. They had already planned for it. Deep in the command bunker, the human commander gave a new order: prepare for orbital sighting. The order meant only one thing: use the ground artillery to target ships in space. It was something no other species would dare to attempt. But humanity was desperate enough to try. The gunners inputted new coordinates. Calculations scrolled across old metal panels, glowing faintly in the dark. Every gunner took a deep breath as they prepared the next volley. They weren't just defending a colony anymore. They were challenging the strongest empire in the galaxy head-on. Above the planet, the Empire's main ship began to power up its orbital cannon. It was meant to end the fight in a single shot. But before it could fire, something unexpected happened. The human artillery opened up again, firing rounds not at the ground, but toward the sky. The projectiles tore through the atmosphere, vanishing into space. The Vraxians laughed at first. They thought it was useless. No shell could travel that far, no primitive weapon could breach orbit. Then their laughter stopped. One of their smaller ships suddenly exploded. Then another. The kinetic rounds had been specially designed to travel with minimal drag, using the planet's gravity to slingshot into orbit. It was an old trick mixed with new precision. The Empire's command fleet scrambled to move out of the way, but it was too late for many. The shockwaves rippled through their formation. Every console on the flagship lit up red. The commander of the Empire's force shouted orders, trying to restore control. But the humans had already changed the rhythm of the battle. They weren't just defending anymore, they were hunting. Back on the surface, the soldiers didn't see the damage they caused, but they felt the vibration in the sky. They knew something had shifted. The enemy's bombardment stopped. The ground grew quiet again. The silence was heavy, filled with smoke and the faint sound of wind. The humans sat in their trenches, catching their breath, dust covering their faces. Someone whispered through the comms, "Did we actually stop them?" The reply came after a pause, steady and calm. "We slowed them down. That's enough for today." For the first time since the invasion began, the humans could see the sun break through the clouds. It was weak and pale, but it was still there. They knew the Vraxians would return and in greater numbers. But that moment of quiet felt like victory. Far away, across the galaxy, news of the human defense began to spread. Merchant ships picked up broken transmissions, reports of the Empire losing ground on a small forgotten colony. At first, no one believed it. The Vraxian Empire never lost. But when multiple sources confirmed the data, whispers began across the stars. The story spread faster than light. Humans had stood their ground against the Empire's army. In the Vraxian capital, the High Council gathered in silence. The room that once echoed with laughter now felt like stone. The commanders argued, trying to make sense of what had happened. One advisor said, "They are a primitive species. It must be luck." Another replied, "Then luck has become a weapon. They decided to send more troops, more ships, and stronger weapons. But deep down, something in them had changed." The Vraxians were not used to fear, but the seeds of it had been planted. Back on Vesta Prime, the humans worked through the night. Engineers repaired damaged weapons, medics moved among the wounded, and soldiers sat quietly, sharing rations under the dim light of emergency lamps. No one spoke much. They didn't need to. Every person there knew they had done something incredible. The colony's communication officer looked up at the sky, where faint flashes still flickered from the earlier bombardment. He said softly, "They thought we were weak." And somewhere above the clouds, the Empire's remaining ships regrouped. Their commanders stared down at the planet, unable to believe that such a small, underdeveloped world had resisted them. In that moment, the galaxy's balance shifted. For the first time, the strongest empire had been stopped not by advanced technology, but by determination, coordination, and the stubborn spirit of an ancient species that refused to die quietly. The humans didn't win that day, but they made the galaxy notice them. And as night fell over Vesta Prime, the soldiers stood guard, eyes fixed on the stars, waiting for whatever would come next, because deep inside, they already knew this was only the beginning of something far greater. The next morning on Vesta Prime began in silence. The air was thick with smoke and dust, and the ground still trembled from the battles of the previous day. The humans hadn't slept much, but they didn't complain. Each soldier sat quietly beside their weapon, wiping the soot from their faces and checking their equipment again and again. The horizon was red, and the sky carried the faint glow of fire from distant wrecks. They all knew it wasn't over. The Vraxian Empire never accepted defeat, not even small ones. The humans had managed to stop one wave, but everyone knew more ships would arrive soon. Still, something had changed. The soldiers on Vesta Prime no longer felt like they were waiting to die. They had seen that the enemy could bleed, that the Empire wasn't untouchable. Far above, hidden among the stars, the Empire's main fleet was reorganizing. Hundreds of ships hovered silently in formation, their polished silver surfaces glinting against the light of a nearby sun. Inside the command decks, alien officers moved quickly, adjusting strategies and recalculating their next strike. Their commanders refused to believe that humans, Primitive ground fighters could resist them for long. They had underestimated humanity once, but they wouldn't make that mistake again. They decided to land a much larger force. This time, not just soldiers, but full mechanized divisions and heavy drones. Their goal was simple: to crush human resistance completely, to erase the colony from existence, and to remind the galaxy who ruled it. Down on the surface, the humans detected the movement almost instantly. Their scanners lit up with new signals, stronger and more numerous than before. Everyone knew what that meant: reinforcements, a second wave. The biggest one yet. Inside the control bunker, the human commander looked at the radar. The dots representing enemy ships were so many they almost overlapped. He didn't need to give a speech. Everyone already knew the situation. They could either stand and fight, or the colony and every person on it would vanish. Quietly, orders went out. Crews hurried to reload the big cannons. Engineers fine-tuned the aiming systems, recalibrating by hand. The artillery teams checked each shell, cleaning the dirt and dust off them with care as if they were touching something sacred, the colony's defense. System came alive again. Giant steel machines, rising slowly from the ground like sleeping beasts, awakening after a long slumber. The barrels of the cannons turned toward the dark horizon. The humans called them the Thunder Line, not because of how they looked, but because of the sound they made when they fired. That sound carried across mountains. It made even the bravest soldiers stop and hold their breath. Soon the ground began to shake again. The Vraxian landing ships descended through the atmosphere, glowing like meteors. Their engines tore through the clouds as they spread across the sky. The aliens had brought everything they had: tanks, drones, flying carriers, and legions of soldiers. To them, it was going to be a quick and final strike. But the humans didn't panic. They had been waiting for this moment. From their hidden bunkers, the artillery crews received new coordinates. They could barely see the enemy yet, but their radar and scouts had already mapped every movement. The alien army had no idea that the humans were watching them from every ridge, every trench, every shadow. The humans had learned from the first battle. They had seen how the enemy moved, how they formed their lines, how their shields flickered under certain frequencies. Now they were ready to exploit every weakness. When the first Vraxian ships touched down, the order went out: target the lead transports first. The cannons turned. The operators double-checked the wind speed, temperature, and range. No one spoke. Everyone waited for the word that would start the storm. Up in the command bunker, the human commander gave a small nod. That was all it took. The ground erupted. The Thunder Line opened fire, sending hundreds of projectiles screaming through the air. The explosions were so bright they turned night into day. The noise rolled across the valleys, echoing through the mountains like the planet itself was roaring. Each shell that landed tore through the alien lines with unstoppable force. The Vraxian soldiers tried to activate their shields, but the impact was too much. Their barriers flickered and broke under the pressure. The Empire's machines, once symbols of unstoppable strength, were thrown aside by sheer kinetic power. In orbit, the Empire's sensors went wild. They couldn't make sense of what was happening. Their computers had no data for this kind of weaponry. The readings were chaotic, impossible to track. It was raw physics, mass, speed, and gravity, working in perfect harmony. The alien officers on the command ships shouted in confusion. "What are they using?" one demanded, but no one could answer. All they could see were waves of destruction spreading across the surface, breaking their formations apart. On the ground, the humans kept firing. Each cannon blast felt like an earthquake. The gunners worked non-stop, moving shells into place, adjusting levers, wiping sweat from their eyes. They had no time to think about fear. They only focused on the rhythm of the battle, the thunder, the recoil, the reload. When the first wave of shells ended, the battlefield was unrecognizable. The once perfect formations of the Vraxian army had turned into chaos. The humans had stopped the Empire's greatest war machine with simple, precise, relentless fire. But the aliens weren't done yet. They sent their airships next. Sleek black shapes filled the sky, releasing energy blasts that scorched the ground. The humans scrambled for cover. Dirt and fire rained down. For a moment, it seemed like the Empire might regain control. Then the humans brought out something new. From hidden compartments inside the colony, long tubes rose into the air. They weren't energy weapons. They were missile launchers, but different, modified to track even the smallest movement. When the airships swooped low, the launchers roared to life. Dozens of missiles streaked upward, spiraling through smoke and flame. They didn't follow heat or sound. They followed electromagnetic fields, something the aliens hadn't prepared for. One by one, the ships exploded mid-air, lighting up the sky like falling stars. The Empire's second wave collapsed before it even reached the human lines. For the first time, the alien command realized they were losing not because of weak technology, but because of something far greater: adaptability. Humans changed their tactics faster than any artificial intelligence could process. They adjusted, improvised, and learned within minutes what other species would take years to understand. From orbit, the alien commander stared at the chaos below. His perfect invasion plan was gone. His soldiers were retreating and his machines were burning. The humans were still there, small figures in the dust holding their ground. The humans didn't know what was happening above them, but they could feel it. They could feel the enemy's confusion, their hesitation. For the first time, humanity had forced the most advanced species in the galaxy to question its own superiority. In the distance, the artillery guns went quiet. Smoke rose from their barrels and the soldiers sat beside them, exhausted but proud. Their hands were blistered, their ears ringing from the constant thunder, but none of them wanted to stop. They had fought harder than they ever thought possible. One of the communication officers looked at the radar screen. The enemy signals were pulling back. He couldn't believe it. "They're retreating," he whispered, almost afraid to say it out loud. The news spread through the trenches. The soldiers looked at each other, not cheering, just staring in disbelief. After everything, after endless preparation and impossible odds, they had actually pushed the Empire back. High above the planet, the Empire's fleet broke formation and began to withdraw. They weren't retreating because of mercy. They were retreating to think. The humans had done something that no other species had ever done before. They had forced the strongest military power in the galaxy to stop and reconsider. On the ground, the humans didn't call it victory. They just called it survival. But deep inside, they knew something powerful had begun. The alien empire had seen humanity's artillery, and it had changed everything. The old machines of Earth, the ones the galaxy had mocked, had proven that sometimes strength comes not from new inventions but from courage, will, and the determination to never give up. That night, as the fires slowly faded and the stars returned to the sky, the soldiers of Vesta Prime stood together in silence. They looked up at those same stars, knowing that somewhere out there the Empire was watching them. And though the next battle was surely coming, they didn't feel fear anymore. They felt something else. Something stronger than any weapon they had. Pride. The artillery had awakened, and the galaxy would never forget its sound. The Vraxian Empire had never experienced silence like this before. For centuries, their war fleets had traveled from one star system to another, conquering planets without pause. Every invasion had followed the same pattern: land, destroy, and move on. But now, after the battle on Vesta Prime, there was only quiet inside their command chambers. The Empire's pride had been wounded and no one knew how to react. Reports from the battlefield came in broken and incomplete. The communication officers tried to explain what had happened, but even they struggled to believe it. The words sounded wrong, impossible. Human artillery destroyed armored divisions. Orbital units lost contact, ground forces retreating. When the Vraxian High Command gathered, the atmosphere was heavy. Rows of alien officers stood stiffly as the Supreme Commander entered. His eyes glowed faintly, showing the reflection of countless stars, but even he couldn't hide his frustration. How could a primitive race cause this much damage? He demanded. No one answered. The silence in the chamber said everything. The commanders tried to blame the terrain, the weather, the unexpected density of the planet's magnetic field. Anything except the truth. The truth was that humans had fought back with something more dangerous than advanced technology. They had fought with instinct and unity. The Empire had studied thousands of species before, but none like this one. Humans didn't surrender when logic said they should. They didn't retreat when they were outnumbered. And when they were cornered, they found a way to turn even desperation into strategy. Across the galaxy, the story of Vesta Prime spread faster than light. Traders whispered about it in spaceports. Miners on distant moons repeated the tale over weak radio signals. They all said the same thing. The Empire attacked a human colony and lost. Most didn't believe it at first. It sounded like a rumor made to entertain the weak. But when intercepted transmissions confirmed the event, disbelief turned into curiosity and fear. On Vesta Prime, the humans didn't celebrate. They were too tired for that. The colony was scarred and covered in ash. Machines were broken, the ground was cratered, and the air still smelled like smoke and iron. But there was pride in their exhaustion. Every survivor knew they had done something historic. In the command bunker, the human leader stood over the map of the colony, lit by flickering lights. Around him, officers worked on repairs, moving between damaged communication consoles and cracked screens. They didn't have much left, but they had enough to keep going. Outside, engineers were rebuilding the artillery. Even though the barrels were worn out from overuse, they refused to abandon them. Each cannon had earned respect. It wasn't just a weapon anymore. It was a symbol. The humans knew the Empire would return and in far greater force. But they also knew something the aliens didn't understand yet. Humans learned faster than anyone. Every mistake became experience. Every failure turned into a lesson. In space, the Empire's second fleet gathered near the border systems. It was much larger than the first. Dozens of capital ships and hundreds of smaller crafts. The new commander was colder, more analytical. He had studied human recordings from the first battle, pausing every frame, analyzing every movement. He noticed something that unsettled him. Humans didn't rely on predictable battle formations. Their patterns didn't follow logic, they followed rhythm, emotion, timing. It wasn't chaos. It was flexibility. They adapted faster than any artificial intelligence could calculate. They're unpredictable, he said to his advisors. They act on instinct, but their instinct seems organized. It's like fighting weather. The others didn't understand. They thought he was exaggerating. But deep down, he knew the truth. The humans were dangerous not because of what they built, but because of what they were. Back on Vesta Prime, the humans received intercepted transmissions showing the Empire's movements. It was proof that another invasion was coming. There was no time to rest. The workers repaired power grids, pilots tested new drones, and the artillery crews cleaned every barrel by hand. Everyone played a role, from farmers to scientists. Even the children helped carry supplies. They didn't cry even when the nights grew cold. People had stopped thinking of themselves as separate nations. On that small colony world, they were just one thing: human. When the second fleet finally appeared in orbit, the humans didn't react with panic. They had expected it. The sky filled with lights as the alien ships took position, forming a perfect circle around the planet. The Empire believed overwhelming force would end the resistance once and for all. But this time, the humans didn't wait to be attacked. The artillery batteries opened fire before the first alien ship could deploy. Massive shells flew through the upper atmosphere, leaving trails of blue fire. The Vraxians tried to activate their shields, but the humans had changed the frequency of their rounds, adjusting for the shield harmonics. The first wave of explosions tore through their outer defenses. In the alien flagship, alarms blared. The commander shouted for counterfire, but his officers hesitated. Their targeting systems were useless. The humans weren't where they were expected to be. Every time the sensors locked onto a signal, it disappeared. On the ground, the humans had spread out in unpredictable formations, constantly moving their artillery after every volley. It made them hard to locate. Every shot came from a new direction. To the Empire, it felt like they were fighting ghosts. Then came the moment that truly shook them. The Vraxians detected something massive rising from the colony's southern ridge. It was a rail cannon, larger than anything they had ever seen. The humans had secretly assembled it during the calm after the first battle. It had taken days of silent labor, hidden under camouflage nets and mountains of rock. When it fired, the sound reached the orbit itself. The projectile left the atmosphere and hit one of the Empire's cruisers directly. The explosion was so large that nearby ships were forced to scatter. For the first time, the Empire's fleet retreated in panic, not to regroup, but to escape range. The commander on the alien flagship froze. This wasn't how the galaxy worked. Primitive worlds weren't supposed to fight back. Yet here was a single human colony destroying their most advanced ships using what looked like ancient metal and gunpowder. He turned to his staff and whispered, "What kind of species are they?" The officers had no answer. Back on the surface, the humans didn't know how much damage they had caused. They only saw fewer attacks coming from above, and that was enough. The artillery crews continued firing, sweat dripping from their faces, their arms trembling with exhaustion. They didn't stop, not even when their ears rang or when the ground under them cracked. When the final wave ended, the sky went still again. Smoke hung in the air like a curtain blocking the stars. Slowly, the soldiers began to realize the Empire was pulling back. Messages came in from other human colonies. The news of Vesta Prime's defense had reached them, and now every outpost across the solar frontier was preparing in the same way, fortifying, arming, training. Humanity had become united by something stronger than fear, hope. The galaxy was starting to see it too. Smaller civilizations that had once bowed to the Empire began whispering about rebellion. They watched humans with new eyes. The species once ignored was now becoming a symbol of resistance. But while others celebrated, the humans on Vesta Prime stayed cautious. They knew the Empire wasn't finished. A power that big didn't forget humiliation easily. The next time they would come with everything they had. Still, there was something the Empire couldn't erase: the memory of fear. For the first time in its long history, the Vraxian military had been forced to retreat because of emotion, not logic. In their strategy rooms, their analysts replayed the battle again and again, trying to find a reason beyond luck. But there was no single explanation. The humans were not stronger or faster, they simply refused to lose. The shock of it reached the very heart of the Empire. Their leaders began to question old beliefs. If a young, small species like humanity could break their confidence, what did that mean for the future of their rule? Far away, in the dark bunkers of Vesta Prime, the humans worked quietly under flickering lights. Their machines groaned, their tools sparked, and their voices were low. But there was a strange peace in the air. They had seen what they were capable of. They didn't know what the next battle would bring, but they knew one thing for sure. The Empire wasn't invincible anymore. That realization alone was powerful enough to change the balance of the galaxy. As the last fires faded and dawn touched the horizon, the soldiers of Vesta Prime stood together, watching the light break through the smoke. They didn't need speeches or promises. The sound of distant artillery still echoed in their ears, a reminder of what humanity could do when pushed to its limits. The Empire had learned the hard way that humans were not a weak race hiding behind old machines. They were survivors, fighters, builders, and when threatened, they became something the galaxy had forgotten existed, a force that refused to kneel. The Vraxian Empire had been shocked into silence. Humanity had awakened something ancient inside them: fear. And from that moment on, the galaxy would never look at Earth the same way again. The weeks after the second battle on Vesta Prime were quiet. Too quiet. The air still smelled like smoke, and pieces of broken metal still lay scattered across the plains. The humans walked among the ruins with tired faces, repairing what they could and remembering what they had lost. They had won again, but victory felt strange. It wasn't joyful. It was heavy. Everyone knew it wasn't over. The Empire would come again. It wasn't in their nature to forget or forgive, and next time, they would bring everything. Inside the human command bunker, the leader of the defense stood staring at the map table. The flickering screen showed distant systems where other colonies were sending signals, short bursts of coded messages that all carried the same tone of determination. Across space, humanity was waking up. Every outpost, every station, and every settlement had started preparing for the next war. But one message caught everyone's attention. It came from an old Earth ship that had gone missing decades ago, a deep space research vessel that had vanished near the outer edge of the solar frontier. The message was weak and broken, but it contained one important piece of information. They had found something ancient buried under the surface of a forgotten moon. Something not built by humans, but by a civilization far older. No one knew what it was, but it might help them survive the next invasion. The humans on Vesta Prime decided to investigate. The Empire could attack at any time, but they needed answers. A small crew was chosen for the mission. Their ship wasn't large or advanced, it was old and scarred from years of use. But it was fast and tough, and that was enough. When they left orbit, the people of the colony watched the ship disappear into the dark. Everyone silently hoped they would return with something that could change their fate. Days passed in silence as the ship moved through empty space. The stars looked distant and cold, but the crew didn't feel fear. They were used to loneliness now. Humanity had always explored the unknown, even when the odds were against them. When they finally reached the abandoned moon, they found it covered in dust and shadows. The surface was scarred with strange shapes, ruins that didn't look natural. They sent down drones first, but the signal quickly became unstable. So they decided to land themselves. The moment their boots touched the ground, the silence of the place pressed on them. The ruins were massive, made of a metal that didn't reflect light the way normal alloys did. Deep below, something pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. They followed it underground through a series of tunnels until they reached a vast chamber. In the center stood a structure, a large ring made of unknown material. It wasn't human. It wasn't even from any known species. As they studied it, the machines on their scanners started acting strangely. Numbers flickered, lights flashed, and a wave of static filled the air. Something in the ring was waking up. Then, without warning, the entire structure powered on. A blue light spread through the walls and a soft hum echoed across the chamber. The crew stepped back in awe. They didn't understand what it was, but one thing was clear. It was ancient technology still alive after thousands of years. When they returned to their ship and transmitted what they found to Vesta Prime, the scientists on the colony immediately began decoding the data. It took days to translate the strange patterns, but when they finally did, everyone froze. The ancient ring wasn't a weapon. It was a memory vault, a record of an extinct civilization that had fought the Vraxian Empire long ago. According to the data, this lost species had faced the same enemy and had built powerful defenses before they vanished. The humans realized they were not the first to resist the Empire. But maybe they could be the first to win. Using the information from the vault, the engineers on Vesta Prime began building new machines. The blueprints weren't complete, but they contained ideas, concepts of energy amplification, shield harmonics, and kinetic redirection. The technology was far beyond human understanding, but with effort and creativity, they began adapting parts of it to their artillery systems. For the first time, humanity wasn't just surviving, they were evolving. Meanwhile, in the heart of the Empire, the Council of Rulers gathered again. The loss of 2 fleets had shaken their faith in their own power. The commander who led the last battle stood before them, silent while the others debated. Some demanded full-scale annihilation of the human race. Others hesitated, warning that another failure could destroy the Empire's reputation. "Then what do you suggest?" one of the rulers hissed. "We study them," said the commander quietly. "We understand why they fight the way they do." But his words were drowned out by anger. The Empire wasn't used to waiting. They were used to control. And so a third invasion was prepared, larger than anything before. The fleet stretched across half a star system, carrying weapons that could level continents. They didn't plan to capture this time. They planned to erase. When the humans detected the movement of the fleet, they didn't panic. The news spread through every colony, but the fear that had once existed was gone. Instead, there was a strange calm. On Vesta Prime, the artillery crews stood ready again. The new hybrid systems built from the ancient data were operational. They glowed faintly blue, humming with quiet energy. They called them pulse cannons. Each one was capable of delivering a strike powerful enough to disrupt energy shields at massive distances. As the Empire's armada appeared in orbit, the humans didn't hide underground this time. They stood under the open sky, watching the lights above. The leader of the human defense gave a short speech, not through loudspeakers, but through calm words shared on open comms. "We are not fighting for revenge. We are fighting to live free. Remember, no matter how strong they look, they bleed like us. Fire when ready." And the sky lit up. The first volley from the new pulse cannons fired straight into orbit, leaving trails of light brighter than dawn. The shockwaves tore through the Empire's formation, breaking their perfect symmetry. Their shields, designed for traditional weapons, failed against the strange harmonic energy. In the Empire's flagship, systems went dark. The commander shouted orders, but the crew couldn't stabilize the power. Their own technology was turning against them. Back on the surface, the humans didn't stop firing. The artillery rhythm was like a heartbeat now, steady, confident, alive. The Empire tried to land ground forces, but as soon as their ships entered the atmosphere, the humans hit them mid-air. The explosions painted the sky orange and gold. The ground shook, but no one ran. Everyone stood together. Engineers, miners, medics, farmers, every one of them a soldier now. And then, something extraordinary happened. The ancient ring on the distant moon, the one the humans had discovered, suddenly activated again. It opened a large energy field across space, a ripple that stretched all the way to Vesta Prime. The humans didn't understand how, but the energy merged with their defense systems, amplifying their power even more. The next wave of artillery was beyond anything seen before. It wasn't just a battle anymore, it was a message. For the first time in recorded galactic history, the Vraxian Empire's main fleet began to break apart, not from destruction, but from fear. Ships turned away. Crews refused to fight. Commanders went silent. The pride of the Empire was collapsing under the weight of a single human colony's resistance. In space, the human crew watching from orbit couldn't believe what they were seeing. Their home, once just a small mining world, was now defending itself against the most powerful civilization in the galaxy, and winning. On the ground, the artillery fell silent only after the last alien ship disappeared from radar. When the dust settled, the people of Vesta Prime stood together once again. They didn't cheer or dance. They simply looked at the stars and breathed in the quiet. They had survived the impossible 3 times. They had found lost knowledge, built new weapons, and stood against the greatest power known to the galaxy. The battle wasn't just a turning point for humanity, it was a turning point for everyone. Word of their victory spread like wildfire. Across the galaxy, enslaved worlds began to rise. Small rebellions grew into movements. The legend of the humans of Vesta Prime became a symbol. The Vraxian Empire, once feared by all, was now fighting shadows of its own creation. Humanity had done something no one thought possible. They had changed the balance of power in the stars. And as night fell on the battered colony, the leader of the human defense looked up at the faint blue glow of the ancient moon and whispered quietly, "This is just the beginning." The humans didn't know what the next day would bring. The Empire would not stop easily. But they had already proven one truth to the universe. No matter how strong the enemy, no one could crush the will of humanity once it was awakened. The turning point had arrived, and from this moment on, the galaxy would have to live with a new fear, the fear of the sound of human artillery. The galaxy had changed. For the first time in thousands of years, the Vraxian Empire's fleets were retreating, their arrogance shattered by a species they once considered primitive. Across the stars, stories of the humans of Vesta Prime spread like wildfire. Traders carried the tales through asteroid routes. Smugglers whispered them in backroom bars, and even enslaved species began to believe that freedom might be possible. But the humans knew it wasn't over. Victory had come at a heavy price, and peace was still far away. The Empire was wounded but not defeated. In the command bunker on Vesta Prime, the leader stood before a cracked screen showing the vast emptiness of space. The data coming in was clear. The Empire was gathering a final armada, the largest in recorded history. This time they weren't sending just soldiers. They were bringing their planetary seed ships, weapons capable of burning entire worlds. Every surviving colony sent a message back to Vesta Prime. "We're ready. We stand with you." The humans didn't have much time. Every engineer, pilot, and mechanic worked without rest. The factories that once made mining tools were now producing defense shields, ammunition, and pulse generators. The sound of machines echoed day and night across the colony. No one complained. Everyone understood what was coming. In orbit, the last of the repaired ships floated silently, their hulls scratched and dented but ready for one final mission. They weren't sleek like the Empire's ships. They were ugly, patchworked, and loud. But every piece of metal had a story behind it, every burn mark a reminder of survival. And in the middle of this preparation, something unexpected happened. The ancient moon, where the humans had discovered the strange alien vault, came alive again. A faint blue light spread from its surface, pulsing slowly like a heartbeat. Scientists rushed to analyze it, and what they found shocked everyone. The vault was no longer just a memory. It had started transmitting data on its own. It was sending coordinates deep into empty space beyond any known star system. It was like the ancient builders were calling the humans somewhere, leaving behind one last secret. But there was no time to explore. The Empire's armada had already entered the system. From the surface of Vesta Prime, the sky began to darken as massive shadows appeared. The Vraxian ships covered the horizon, blocking out the stars. Their engines glowed red, lighting up the clouds. It looked like the end of the world, yet on the ground no one ran. Children stood beside their parents, watching silently. Soldiers took their positions, hands steady on their weapons. Artillery crews stood beside their giant cannons, faces tired but fearless. The leader's voice came through the comms, calm and steady. "Remember, they think we're weak. Let them think that. But when we fire, we remind them who we are." Then the first shots were fired. The Empire opened with orbital strikes, massive beams of light raining down on the planet. Entire mountains shook. The ground cracked. Dust rose like storms. But the humans had planned for this. They had built shield grids powered by the same mysterious energy from the alien vault. The shields flared but held strong. Inside the bunkers, lights flickered. Technicians shouted updates. Communication lines buzzed with static. Still, no one gave up. Then came the moment they had been waiting for, the order to fire back. The artillery roared to life. Dozens of cannons thundered at once, shaking the ground with every shot. The new pulse rounds flew upward, cutting through the sky like glowing comets. In orbit, the Empire's ships tried to intercept them, but the rounds hit faster than they could react. Explosions lit up the blackness of space. Ship after ship went silent. The humans didn't stop. They fired again and again, adjusting angles, recalculating distances, working together as one giant machine powered by determination. Every shell that left the barrel carried the same message: "We are still here." But the Empire fought back harder. Their siege ships unleashed waves of fire across the planet, breaking through parts of the shields. Entire regions were hit, turning forests into ash. The ground forces of the Empire began to descend in burning transports, landing across the plains. Humanity was outnumbered. The enemy's technology was still far superior. But numbers and machines didn't matter anymore. The humans had something the Empire would never understand: unity. In every ruined street, every collapsed building, humans stood shoulder to shoulder. They moved their artillery again and again, refusing to let the enemy lock onto their positions. When one cannon was destroyed, another crew stepped in. Even civilians joined the defense, guiding supply trucks, repairing cables, carrying ammunition. It wasn't chaos anymore, it was purpose. Above the planet, the battle reached a scale never seen before. The Empire's capital ships clashed with the small human fleet that had launched from orbit. The human ships darted between massive cruisers, using gravity wells and debris fields to their advantage. They weren't trying to destroy everything, they were buying time. And on the surface, that time was being used wisely. At the heart of the colony, near the command bunker, engineers had been working on something new. A final weapon powered by the combined energy of the alien vault and the colony's last remaining reactors. It wasn't designed to kill. It was designed to end the fight. They called it the Echo, Womu. Echo was built to create a massive energy pulse that could disable every machine within a certain range, an energy shock strong enough to knock out the Empire's entire fleet if activated correctly. But there was one problem. It had to be triggered manually from inside the power core. When the leader heard that, he didn't hesitate. "Prepare it," he said. The others protested, saying it was too dangerous, that no one could survive the activation wave. But he simply smiled and replied, "If this is the price for peace, it's worth it." Outside, the battle reached its peak. The sky was burning red and gold. The sound of explosions mixed with thunder as artillery fired its last rounds. The ground shook under the footsteps of alien war machines closing in. The leader walked into the power chamber, surrounded by blinding light. He could hear the rumble of distant gunfire and the faint hum of the Echo charging up. Through the comms, voices came through, officers, soldiers, engineers, all telling him the same thing: "We're ready." He looked at the screen showing the planet's surface, humans everywhere, still fighting, still refusing to give up. Then he placed his hand on the activation panel. "Let them remember," he said softly, "that when the Empire came for us, we stood." And he pressed the switch. A blinding pulse of light shot upward from the planet, expanding faster than any weapon ever made. The wave spread through the atmosphere, then through space itself. For a moment, everything went silent. The stars seemed to fade. Then, one by one, the Empire's ships went dark. Their engines shut down, their weapons froze, and their systems collapsed. The entire armada became silent, lifeless giants drifting through the void. On the ground, the same wave passed over the humans, but their hybrid shields absorbed most of it. The colony lights flickered, but then came back stronger. The echo had worked. The battle was over. When the smoke cleared, the humans stepped outside their bunkers. The once dark sky was now bright again. The massive alien ships floated silently in orbit, powerless and defeated. There were no cheers at first, just quiet disbelief. People looked up, waiting for another attack that never came. Then slowly the realization spread. They had done it. The people who were once laughed at for their old machines and outdated weapons had defeated the most powerful empire in the galaxy. Messages began flooding in from across the stars. Other worlds were rising. The Empire's rule was crumbling. Humanity had not only survived, they had lit a spark that was spreading through the galaxy. That day became known as the final stand of Vesta Prime. In the years that followed, the humans rebuilt. The scars of war remained, but they had become symbols of strength. The artillery cannons that had once defended the colony were preserved, not as weapons but as monuments. Every generation that came after was taught the same lesson, that courage is not in strength but in the will to stand when no one else will. The Empire never fully recovered. The fear of humanity lived in their memories. Even those who had never seen Earth now whispered the same phrase across the stars: never provoke the humans. When their artillery fires, worlds change. And somewhere deep in the galaxy, that ancient alien vault pulsed one last time, sending a final message into the void. They remembered what we could not. They stood together. The humans of Vesta Prime had done what no one else dared. They had faced the might of an empire, stood against extinction, and won not through power, but through unity, courage, and heart. The war had ended. But the legend of humanity had just begun.